Hey, welcome to another episode. I'm Brian Roycentul, your host, and today I'm super excited to welcome Caleb Ulffers. He's the co-founder and CEO of Heaven Athletic, organized bags for high performance and professional athletes. They basically reinvented the gym bags, guys. They have sold over $4 million and work with hundreds of top athletes while creating the category of organized bags. Hey, Caleb, thanks for being on the show.
What's up, Brian? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. So, why don't you go ahead and tell the audience more about you and the company?
Yeah, so my background is in the startup space. I got started in events, hosting really cool founders of really big companies that we're all familiar with, like AOL and Twitter and Zappos and Gary Vaynerchuk and whatnot. And that kind of got my feet wet in the startup space. And so then I started working in marketing for a couple of startup companies, running growth, and then eventually started a couple of my own tech companies. A services-based business that we merged with a telehealth company, and then an app that helps nurses find secondary shifts at other places. And then started Haven Athletic around 2018. It was kind of my own problem, classic startup story. I was in the gym digging through my bag, couldn't find my stuff, fully emptied it out, like kind of ripped it apart.
Uh,
And at that point,
I've
I was
been
just
there.
like, yeah, most people have, right? And that was the point where I was like, I think we can do something better. And that's kind of what kicked this whole thing off.
Right. So, I was going to ask you, why you decided to reinvent the gym bag, but I guess you just answered that, right?
Yeah, my own problem. And then, I was coming from the technology world, and then in between there, I was also teaching Fortune 500s how to build product through lean startup and design thinking. And so, coming from the tech world into the e-commerce world, I've had all of those. Yeah, right there, you got it. I've had all of those principles kind of ingrained into how I do things for the first 8 years or so of my working life. And so when it came to e-commerce, I was like, okay, I have this problem, but that doesn't mean that there's a company here. That doesn't mean that there's something to actually solve. So the first step was asking everyone else, and also like knowing how to do non-biased surveys. Not like, hey, do you hate your gym bag? But rather, what are your thoughts about your gym bag? And everyone's had the same answer. It's like, it's cheap, it's a piece of junk, it falls apart, I have to buy new ones, it's messy, I hate it, no one's doing anything cool. And that was the big signal for us, like, there's something here.
Tell me a little bit more about the non-biased surveys. I will tell you why I ask and why I think it's really relevant to today's era of e-commerce. I think always, but even more today. I mean, attribution or tracking is broken, or kind of, is at least it's not what it used to be. What it was.
Yeah.
So it looks like for many brands, the only way or one of the only ways of getting, data uh, about their customer journey is through attribution or the lack of. And a very useful resource are actually the post-purchase surveys, among others. But with ChatGPT and surveys, and I'm mentioning like unrelated stuff, but the common thing about those is like it it put us human beings, you know, to a test because we don't really know how to ask questions. You know, we when using ChatGPT, we can get what we want only if we know what to answer, right? What to
Yeah.
ask. Sorry, not what to answer. I don't know how to ask questions either. So
Right.
with the post-purchase survey, it's the same. You can get the answer to what you asked for. So in this case, please tell me more about, do you have any background or education on that, or in which context do you use that?
Yeah, I mean, it's partly in the design thinking process, and it's also from my background I have a degree in marketing. And
Right.
so in marketing, you're often doing research, and in that research, there's specific ways to do it. And a lot of people think about like some of the generic ways, or you just ask questions and find out information, and now you have data, but that data might be actually kind of invalid because you didn't ask it in the right way. And so you want to ask very open-ended questions. You don't want to ask yes or no's. You don't want to ask leading questions. So if I ask you, Brian, do you hate your gym bag? I'm asking a leading question. I'm saying like, you hate it, right? I'm almost like encouraging you to say yes to get the data that I'm looking for. And if I ask 20 people that, most more than likely they're gonna be like, yeah, I don't really like it. And then I'm like, oh, he hates his gym bag. Whereas if I say like, hey Brian, what do you think about your gym bag? Very neutral, not like trying to like edge you into saying something about it, not encouraging you that it's anchoring that it's already a negative experience. And so maybe you actually like it. And if I ask that question to 20 people and 20 people are like, yeah, it's okay. I don't really think too much about it. That's actually a terrible signal. Whereas if I would have gotten all of you to say like, yeah, I do don't, yeah, that's a good point. I don't like it. It's not good data to go off of. And so there's all sorts of things like that, like when you're crafting the survey, how you're administering the survey, how you're talking to people, whether you're talking to one person or the massive companies are doing what are they called? Can't think of it. Where you bring multiple people into a room and you ask them questions.
Yeah,
And
focus
yeah,
groups.
that's also bad data because most often you get groupthink. So if someone like me who has a strong opinion is like, "Oh, I think bags are terrible. Don't all of you guys think bags are terrible?" And then everyone's like, "Well, I mean, yeah, Caleb thinks it's kind of terrible." So like I guess yeah, I probably agree. When really that person might have a different thought, but they don't want to go against what the group is saying because there's like this group think. And so
Did
doing
you?
like group surveys, especially as an early company, is a terrible idea.
Oh man, you're mentioning so valid points. I have like three books that come to mind. I'm not a super. I mean, I don't particularly love the art of reading, but I found myself reading a lot in the
Mhm.
last few years. Probably I'm getting older, and that's why. But I, I this like Influence by Robert Cialdini or something like that. I cannot pronounce. It's an amazing book, the
Yeah.
principles of influence. And the last thing he said about, in this focus group, why by raising your hand you might influence some other people. There are many examples of really crazy things, like you are waiting for the doctor, in a room full of people, and one person comes into the room, and then you start clapping, and then everyone starts clapping, and they don't know why, and it's like
Yeah.
this crazy thing is human behavior. And then the other
Right.
one is Ask. I don't know if you by Ryan Levesque. It's
Mhm.
he has like what he calls the Ask method. He has trainings, courses, and certifications around that, and it's pretty good, at least to me, to know how to ask and how to analyze the results of surveys in such a smooth way. I don't know if now it might be old or not. I think the guy updates it, but I don't know. And then the other one is Never Split the Difference. I don't know if you know.
So good.
Yeah, it's pretty good. And it's basically which questions to ask in different stages, and different type of questions, problem questions, and, or reward questions, or you want different type of questions for different type of answers, to try to dig deeper into the problem, or maybe to try to transition how that problem affects them in their business or whatever, right? So I think it's so good um, that we started talking about this, and this wasn't
Yeah.
expected, but I really love the topic, you can tell. So
Yeah.
you exited two companies, a SaaS company and a services company, is that correct?
Mhm. Yeah.
I guess, we all as human beings want what we don't have. I have never owned a brand, and I was like, what can I do? What can I create? What can but I guess that I have had conversations in this show, offline and online, from, you know, ecom founders who own or owned in the past agencies, and said, I'm thinking about leaving my brand because it's so much easier. The agency or the different is less travel, less clients, more profits, so less
Yeah.
headaches. So it's like we all want what we don't have. So in this case, you built and exited two of them. So first, I would like to ask you, what do you miss from each of those type of companies?
Yeah. What do I miss? The nice thing about a technology company is the speed of iteration and building product. When you have a physical good, you're looking at months. It's way more complex between the design, the tech pack, the shipping, freight, like just everything that goes into it. Whereas if you're doing something in technology, I mean, you 2 week sprints, right? Like design thinking, all that kind of stuff. Like you can just like spin through stuff and get iterations and get it into customers' hands and get feedback and move very quickly. So that's probably like the biggest thing I miss about being in a more tech focused company.
Yeah. Yeah, yesterday I don't know why I have never watched it. So yesterday I started watching, I think it's called Playlist, the Spotify's TV show, Spotify story. And it was like, I should start my own, tech company. It was like, I come from a background of computer science. I used to be a developer and had like my first company was a software factory. And then we built
Mhm.
a startup. We didn't sell it. It went bankrupt. So it was amazing, amazing lesson. After
Yeah, it's a good
we had
experience.
it's like, yeah, we after that I said that I'm not immune to anything, but you will have a hard time knocking me down because it's like I have learned like the good, the bad, and the ugly of so many
Yeah.
things. That is like I created like like a protection, let's say, around my stomach mainly when being in front of tough situations. But in this case, um, yeah, tech company. I love the the. It's like you feel that with a laptop. Many times this is true. You can change the world. You can do whatever you want, and you can spend a whole night or you can spend the whole week creating this, and you don't have these manufacturer telling you in China or whatever, telling you, yeah, hey, we are delayed or the products have.
Yeah.
So it's a different thing. And what about with
Yeah.
the services company?
The nice thing about services is you can do it pretty scrappy. And even like before you build technology, before you do automations, you can just have people providing some of those services, just kind of manually. And so you can spin it up very quickly. You can get cash very quickly. You can sign agreements doing stuff for people very quickly. And then kind of along the way, you can find out more efficiencies. You can find out better ways to do things. You can clarify what you're doing for who and why, and then that kind of leads you to better technology solutions in the end. So it's I would say services is probably like the easiest company to like get started on, um, compared to e-commerce or like a software.
What about e-commerce, compared to a few years ago? How do you see the landscape of e-commerce?
Terrible. Run away. Don't do it. We're in a really tough spot, after iOS 14 and COVID. And if you're looking at fundraising, like kind of everything for e commerce is wildly difficult. You have to be an expert in so many things: product, marketing, logistics and operations, finance. Like, it's not like, oh, just, jump in and spin up a company. Everything is hard. I've been talking to a lot of founders about that this year, anywhere from founders at my size doing 7 figures to 8 figures, and even 9 figures. Like every founder I've talked to is like, this shit ain't easy. And I think one thing that gives me a little bit of hope is like with the advent of AI, like technology is going to get easier and better, and e-commerce will get better, but AI can't replace what I'm doing in creating a product and understanding customers and working with the factories. And I mean, maybe someday, but that's probably like quite a ways off. Whereas like there's people already replicating technology solutions out there. And so if you fast forward like 5 years, you can imagine a lot of software companies are in a very bad place because they've been replicated by your chat GPT on your home computer. And now you're doing your own customer service, automated. Whereas someone coming and replicating what I'm doing isn't that easy for someone to just spin up on a chat GPT LLM.
I I speak with many brands on the pod, with the agency, offline, online, and
Mhm.
it's the exact same thing. For many of them, profitability is the number one issue,
Yeah.
and that's tied to many other things on the
Mhm.
back, you know. But yeah, it's a it's a definitely challenging year, and we all need to level up the marketing and be conscious not only on decreasing costs, which is something necessary, and we get it, but there's a limit to how much you can decrease costs. without, sacrificing, growth. And
Right.
sometimes it's necessary, but there's gotta be a way up, not only to avoid going, under.
Mm.
So it's a it's an year that for the brands, we again, there are some brands still shining, but many others going under, and some others that even those brands that are shining are doing so by putting way too many more efforts compared to previous years. So if they
Right.
are growing 30%, it wasn't as easy as growing 30% last year, right? Or
Right.
50%. It's
Exactly.
too much
Yeah.
job, more costs involved, probably in the bottom line, it's not that percentage as well. So it's definitely a tough one. But before going
Mhm.
into your brand specifically, I wanted to pick your brain a little bit on the following because I love, you know, coming up with ideas. I suck at them. I always say, I will generate the 100 ideas, which
Yeah.
probably a lot of them will be bad, but it's 100 ideas for the 10-song album. You know, it's probably 90% are going to not be good, but I hope 10 make it to the album. So
Yeah.
in this case, you have created some companies, and in this case, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm quoting you, from something you said. Uh, you created those companies from crazy ideas. If you had to create a company today, what would it be about?
Good question. There's always kind of like ideas popping up in my head, but I think if I was creating a company today, I would think actually less of a crazy idea. Crazy ideas can lead you to really good solutions, and like that's part of the ideation phase in design thinking is like no limitations. Like brainstorming doesn't mean like, well, what if we created a rocket to the moon, and then you tell that person that that's impossible. Brainstorming says, yeah, great point. And then what if on that rocket we added whatever, it's like you have to just like kind of keep going to see where the idea can take you. And then it kind of could end up landing in something much more realistic, but it took something kind of crazy to get there. But if I was going to start a new company today, honestly, and I think the suggestion for a lot of people like looking to get into something is like look for a small win. Don't create a company that's going to go to $1 billion. Create a company that can do like 2 to 5 million a year and sell it for 1 to 2x revenue. That's a massive win for most people, right? Like becoming a millionaire. And it's far less work than trying to create and set up something to go to 100 million or a billion. And with all the stress and pressure and like trying to raise money. And it's like, honestly, like join like an Amazon drop shipping thing or talk to a Chinese factory. I like to talk about this on my Instagram about looking at really normal products and finding ways to improve them. And a lot of times, like those small improvements are enough to create a 7 figure business. And they're also not difficult. Like you can find the factories in China that make simple products online that are doing, 50 to $100,000 a month in sales, make some simple improvements, or even just like a lot of those are crappy Chinese factories, add a nice brand. So instead of buying a microphone that's by some company called Shihuan X, you buy a microphone by a company called like Blue Microphones. And the average person on Amazon would rather buy from like a brand that kind of looks nice versus like some unknown fake word where it's coming directly from the factory and the service is going to be terrible and kind of all the things that come with that. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity to make like micro improvement and find success.
You mentioned selling the company. How did you go about selling your companies? And I know this question can lead to a very long,
Yeah.
whole different episode. Why not? But if you had to summarize it in a few sentences, how did you go about selling a company? And do you think that's applicable to 2024 for a brand?
My exits were both kind of special cases. One of them, my co-founders bought me out after we raised the capital for it because, at that point you're looking to be pretty involved, and I was looking to focus more on what I was doing with Haven. And then the other one of our main investors had all the connections kind of set up to partner that off. And so I didn't have to go through like a traditional buying selling process
Okay,
that I think you would normally do, M&A, all that stuff like banking and all the reviews, et cetera, et cetera.
okay, great. No worries. So Now talking about your company again, you were talking about, these Chinese factories and trying to, when I was asking you, about creating these, you know, potential new company and doing something different, was that like the process you went through to create this bag, or what was the process like when you created this gym bag?
Yeah, so for us, especially coming from the technology space, we didn't know what we were doing, and so it was just every day trying to like find out more information on how do you create a physical product. And it took quite a while to kind of figure that out because it's a fairly closed off industry. And there's a few companies like Pietra, I know is one of them where like they actually help you with all like, hey, I have an idea. What do I do? Because there's so many steps in between here and getting that product in your hands. And they're not easy steps. They're not like just learn how to code or like get chat GPT to like build a website for you or like, some simply like it's actually quite difficult and laborious. Um, and so we had to learn a lot of things. And along that process, we figured out how to do those things. But then once we had everything we need, which is called a tech pack, which is, a multi-page document that details the how to make your product, what materials do you use, what are the measurements of everything, how you sew it, all of that. And so we had that. And then we started going to factories thinking, now we can get a product. And instead, we heard for about a year no from everyone because the product is so difficult to make and no one has ever made anything like what we wanted to make that they told us no. And they were like, even if we could make this, it's not mass manufacturable. You couldn't make it at scale. We could maybe make you a sample, but we're not going to be able to make thousands of these.
How
And
did
so
you
it was a long, hard process to get through that.
how did you feel when you got that answer?
Oh, super annoying, but also very motivated. I mean, this whole project and company has been an exercise in grit. We heard no for so many years from everyone, like friends who made fun of me saying I was starting like a purse company. Other people who had built
Hey,
bags and
what's
were
wrong with
like, "Oh,
that?
yeah, I know, I know." Other people who had built bags for like Nike and Adidas, and they told us like, "Oh, well, if you're going to make this, it's going to cost you $250,000 minimum. You're going to need to work with the factories. You're going to have to place MOQs. You're going to have to create the molds and just like all of these things." And we were like, "What? Like that's not. There's no way. Like there's no way that's real." And so we just kept like using the internet and like asking questions and talking to anyone and everyone that we could. And I mean, the whole process was like 2.5, 3 years to finally find a factory and get that first sample in our hands. And the whole time we were just like, we think there's an opportunity. No one else is doing this. We have all the data that we need to do this and sell it. And so if we can just find someone to make it, we think it's there. We think this is a smart bet. And we just kept going down that path until we could find those people who could do it for us.
3 years. That's wow. So for anyone, listening to this, watching this, and thinking about creating a company, well, you told them not to do it in the first place, to be fair, but
Yeah.
even if they go for it, um, it's, it's tough. We have had people here in the show saying 5 years, 10 years, 2 years.
Mhm.
It's still a lot. In
Mhm.
movies or TV shows, it happens in a blink of an eye, but in
Right.
life, 2 years, it's a long time. It's I imagine a roller coaster of emotions of,
Yeah.
trying to hear from somebody and said, oh, on Monday I'll have an answer. And then you don't hear from them until 2 weeks later. And then they said no. And then it's like, I can imagine that it's so frustrating, even more if you're building it, in China, which is so far
Yeah.
away. And it's, you know, I can only imagine. So the process basically was you designed that, you put it together, you thought it, you created that document, and then you found the factory that said yes after many attempts. And then did you release it to the mass market online, or did you try to gauge interest in, I don't know, any other way?
Yeah, so the kind of final step in building a product, especially like lean startup, is will someone pay you money for it? And actually, there's some ways that you can do that earlier. So Noah Kagan runs a company called Sumo, and he has a process. If you Google it, it's I think it's like $1,000 in a weekend or like beef sumo jerky. Jerky Sumo or something. And his goal was like, I bet I can create a company and generate $1,000 in a weekend. And I'm going to show you how. And I'm not going to use any of my contacts or like, because it's a big company and he knows a lot of people. Like I'm going to do it from scratch. And essentially, what he did was sold the product first. So he put up a landing page. He's like, hey, we're selling beef jerky. We're selling it to companies who want this for snacks for employees. If you want to buy it, buy it here. And then anyone who buys it, uh, at the end of the weekend, he just sends them an email and he refunds them. He's like, hey, I'm refunding your money. Or even before that, he's like, hey, we're actually out of stock, but we're going to have it in, 2 months. And you can either hold this and we'll give you a discount or we'll go ahead and refund you right now. But putting it online and getting people to actually give you their money is the final test. And if you can do that sooner, that's great.
Yeah, I don't know if it was Frank Kern or Russell Branson who did something similar once.
Mhm.
And it was all about, that, gauging interest by getting actual customers. And then if they bought, saying one of the things they mentioned, refund or, you know, we keep the money until we get the product. So yeah,
Right. So that's what we did. Once we got a sample, we took pictures of it, we put it online, and we said, hey, we're building this bag. It's really expensive. It's going to take us 8 months to manufacture it. If you want it, if enough people buy it, we'll go manufacture it. And so we put it just on Shopify and we were very clear like, hey, you can buy this. It's going to take 8 months. We'll keep you updated on what we're doing. It's kind of like Kickstarter, but we ran it ourselves. And we had enough people buy it. We had like 100 people buy it in the summer of 2020 during COVID lockdowns in the United States. And I was like, that was a big enough signal for us to like start going down that road to manufacture it.
Yeah, and fast forward today. I know you, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I have the understanding that you work with athletes and influencers. So
Mhm.
this is a pretty hot topic in the last few years, and especially in 2024, with the rise of TikTok and some other, the whole social commerce ecosystem, let's say. So how do you approach these people, and what's your process for them to promote your products?
Yeah. So the whole process with athletes and influencers starts with having an incredible product. There's a myriad of awful products out there, and everyone just kind of doing the same thing as everyone else or only doing something because they've put a new brand around it. And when you come at it from that point, like you have no angle. You have to pay the fees. You have to work with them only if they're willing to. It is probably going to be a pain in the ass, honestly. Um, the way that we have done it is we're in a very special position where we have really good product market fit. We also have a really expensive product. And so we've had people messaging us since day one asking if they can get their hands on the bag and being willing to trade video content for us. And it's every time it happens, like it happens every week at this point, and it's always cool. Like no matter the person, anyone with like 10 to 20,000 followers, all the way up to like 5 million followers, seriously professional athletes, people at the top of their game across like boxing, NFL, NBA, NHL, MLB. And we've been able to work with all of them for free because they really love the product and it's actually made a difference in their lives.
So it's more inbound than outbound, right?
Yes. Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, I I believe in what you say, in what you said. Like, of course, if you have a great product, it's way more likely that someone approaches you and ask for, a product in return of whatever,
Mhm.
right? But what if, I don't know if you have done it in the beginning, or if somebody, that has done it too, but what if they don't ask for it, and you need to go outside? Have you thought about how you could do it? How you could approach them?
There's a few people that we've worked with where we've reached out to them, but generally it's they've liked a photo, they've left a comment on something, and so then we'll send them a message, if it's someone that we'd be interested in working with, like, "Hey, like saw you left a comment, like, would love to send you one." And so we've done, excuse me, more of a seeding approach where which is really hard because we have an expensive product. It's also expensive to make, but we've given it out for free with no strings attached. And so we built the company on that, whether they were reaching out to us or we were reaching out to them. um, we were offering it to them with kind of just like, hey, we'd love for you to like check it out because we had so much faith in how good it is, and we knew that they would resonate. And so like 95% of the people that we did that with, once they got it, were willing to create a video and post online for us.
Makes sense. I mean, I mean, to me, I'm a nobody, but at least to me, it makes sense that
Mhm.
it's way better spent the money, in, giving product to people, to these influencers or athletes, than spending it on ads, especially in the beginning, if that's what you need, because those people are likely, or probably are going to give you more leverage in the short and even long run than only spending a few, hundreds or thousands of dollars on ads and getting a few purchases back.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. It was really beneficial. We still spend on ads and ads work well for us, but the word of mouth that comes with working with so many influencers makes a really big difference.
Yeah, of course. I would say mainly in the beginning, to validate things and to get
Mhm.
yeah, more validation and more organic content as well. So talking about acquisition now, I know you just said, product market fit is key. And I totally agree. If you don't have a great product, everything is going to be an uphill battle, everything. So for every brand listening to this or watching this, it doesn't make sense, at least again, uh, for me, I don't know what you think of this, but it's definitely tougher trying to solve one problem without solving the main problem first, which is having a good product.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's starts for me, it always starts with the product. What's the product? What are you making? Who is it gonna resonate with?
yeah, and in this case, which channels are you using to acquire customers?
We are primarily doing Facebook, Instagram, and then we have word of mouth. We have a ambassador program. We've tried a referral program. It's like sort of worked, sort of not, and pretty much everyone who I've talked to about that said it's fairly similar when it comes to like referral programs. So, but yeah, our bread and butter is Facebook and Instagram ads.
It's the same for every company I speak with. And I
Hmm.
think that Kantar, this entity that they publish a lot of reports and they do a lot of surveys and many other things. They published that I think a few weeks ago, if I'm not mistaken, that the number one, uh, channel for paid ads is Meta across the board, and it's not a shocker. I
Hmm.
mean, it's not a surprise. At least for me, every brand I speak with, Meta is what shines for them. For some others, TikTok is working well, but the main revenue driver is still Meta. So, what's working for you there? What kind of content do you put? Uh, do you create for the ads?
We do a lot of static content, and it works well. And we often just show the product. And we've just started. We've done video before, and it's kind of ebbed and flowed. And it's a lot harder to build good video ads, with the film and the hook and the script compared to like just throwing some text on a photo and making the photo really well. So we've used photos for a long time, and they've always worked really well for us. We're just starting to spin up more video ads now to kind of see if we can start to push the account with those.
Have you tried scaling up? I don't know if aggressively, but with a good base, in an ongoing basis, with those same static ads or renewing them over time, but with only statics.
Yeah, and we tend to reach a bit of a ceiling, and so that's why where we're at now is like trying to add some video. We're trying to find a way to kind of push what we're able to spend each day.
Here's my take on that. Of course, if you want, and for the audience as well. These days, I mean, back in the day, in a nutshell, we had a laser targeted audience. I used to have, and I think all media buyers did. I have like a, let's say, file or PDF or whatever, or Notion file with a lot of saved audiences. Like
Mhm.
if I worked with a skincare brand, oh, skincare audiences is like
Right.
this is my little secret, and we used to test a lot and we used to have probably a lot, I don't know, 15, 20, 30 campaigns, depending on how much that brand spent for some of them. even more after COVID, because there was a lot of, accounts being shut down because Facebook was crazy, back then. You used to
Hmm.
block many accounts and never gave them back. So we used to have multiple accounts, multiple campaigns per account. It was a crazy thing. So if you have a theater full of your laser targeted audiences, it's enough to show an average message, in this case, an ad. However, these days, everyone is running, or almost everyone should be at least running broad audiences, or way broader
Hmm.
than before, at least, right? But I think it's mainly broad. So what's laser targeted is the message. So what
Right.
we should be doing to scale is having creative diversity, and diversity not only in the message, diversity in the angles, or diversity in the formats. Some people love watching videos, some people hate them. Some people love watching a certain type of video, some people prefer watch a different type of videos. Some people prefer to be educated online, and some people prefer to be entertained. Some people
Right.
prefer to see an image. So it's the creative diversity is a thing even more these days. We don't need to create 1,000 images or videos every single month, but one of the ways of scaling up it is, and we have seen success with that as well. But it's not easy. It's not linear either, testing many things. And one of the, let's say, the low hanging fruit that I saw, the folks at Chew on these, for those who don't know about them, is the Ronak Shah, Ash Malwani, those, the founders of Upbe, the supplement brand. They have a beautiful e-commerce community called Chew on these, and they have a newsletter. And they said the other day, once more, that one of the ways they use to quickly iterate ads is to make small tweaks to winning ads.
Hmm.
These really new concepts, they spent, 75% of the time, or something like that, coming up with new concepts, or 25%. I don't remember which one was. And the rest was trying to do a spin of the winning ad. Sometimes it's by changing a small thing in the hook, sometimes it's by changing something in the middle or the call to action, sometimes it's a landing page. So there's a mix of factors. For sure, it's tougher, but it's the current landscape, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Any channel you have tried recently that didn't work?
Um, just like the referral side of things, we try to create like a really cool referral program, and I think there's still a possibility of that maybe kind of kicking off. We got 500 people to join it. We just couldn't get them to like move through the levels. I think at some point that it could work, but we might just be maybe not quite big enough or have enough a big enough audience for it to really work. But it could also be a thing where just isn't worth the squeeze. And generally, like if you have a channel that works, you don't really need to diversify until that channel like stops working.
Yeah, makes sense. So, what about retention? Is it a is it something you're focused on?
No, we're much more focused on acquisition. We do have a 10% returning customer rate, which is pretty surprising considering the overlap of our products. And it's also a testament to how good the product is. That people are coming back to buy a second of it for, gifting is pretty common for like a spouse, a significant other, a child, a coach, things like that. But we're mostly focused on acquisition, and we're going to keep building in the bag space. And so I think that we'll probably maintain more of a acquisition mindsets. We will start building other products that make sense for our audience. The idea of building other organized bags that, if you have this bag, you might come back for another one, along with like, merchandising and things like that. But we're still primarily focused on acquisition.
And it makes sense. I mean,
Hmm.
the nature of your business and what you sell, it makes sense. And everyone is talking more about retention these days, and it's great that happens. It's really, really important. However, we shouldn't neglect acquisition now. We used to neglect
Right.
retention. We shouldn't neglect acquisition because we need customers. Now, for businesses in which it might make more sense to, leverage retention even more, because it's a repeat purchase, or they might leverage subscriptions, then it's a different story. But in this case, yeah, it makes sense to pay attention to acquisition more than to retention. So
Yeah.
I think that was a pretty interesting conversation. I took a lot of takeaways myself, and I'm sure the audience did too. But before you go, I wanted to ask you a few more questions. One, what's next for Haven Athletic?
Yeah, so kind of like I was saying earlier, is like we're going to start making more organized bags in other spaces. So we see the same problem in basically every other space. Any space where you have a bag, generally they're not particularly organized. So that's a little bit of where we're headed.
Okay, amazing. And do you have anyone you can think of to give a shout out to? It's what I call the grateful question. It's someone you are grateful you met or helped you in your career.
Yeah, I mean everyone the high level idea is that especially on Twitter the DTC community has been incredible there. I've connected with so many great people who've offered help, who've shown me the way, who've shared files and financial forecasts and jumped on calls. There's so many really good people in this community that are willing to help, as long as you like show up and you put in the work and you honor their time and you thank them. Um, the 9 operators, of course, are great. Like, I've talked to all of them, and I listened to their podcasts, and they're providing tons of great value. Matt Bertulli, especially, has been particularly incredible. I've been able to talk with him quite a bit and worked with him for a little while. And yeah, it's really cool to be able to access people like that, and for them to be kind enough to share of their time.
Amazing. So everything that Caleb mentioned will be, as always, on the DTCinsider.com. Once you find the episode, you will see the show notes, including everything he mentioned, the book that I mentioned too, and this community as well. Caleb, it was a pleasure having you on the show. I wanted to thank you for delivering such an amazing value and everything you said. For real, I I took a lot of notes, and I'm sure the audience did too. Those who want to stay in touch with you or with your company, where can they go?
Yeah, you could find Haven Athletic at havenathletic.com, or Haven Athletic on most social media. And then you can find me at Caleb ULF. That's the first 3 letters of my last name. So Caleb Ulf on Instagram and Twitter is the best way to find me.
Amazing. Caleb, once more, thank you for being on the show.
No problem. Thanks, Brian.